What's good, guys? We're back with the 5.7 vortec, and I'm gonna have to hope that this is one of our last videos going over what our issue is. Now, in short, 5.7 vortec, we've replaced every sensor on the motor other than coolant temp, purge solenoid, EGR, and that's it. Everything else is new. And we tested the voltages at the ICM, the crank sensor, the coil. They all look good. Another thing is this truck that we got, if you guys have been watching the other videos, is it has really rough idle. It has really low power. I mean, a Prius could smoke it easily, and that's sad for a 350. It's got a popping and sputtering every once in a while. Under load, it stalls even just barely going up the driveway if it makes it. Inconsistent power delivery, inconsistent idle, bouncing tachometer, chugging noise when it's running. Consistent cranking is, sometimes it cranks over in half a crank, sometimes it takes 5 or 6. Another thing it'll do is when you're cranking, it'll sputter and try and start and keep trying, but just not start. Another thing is a really bad fuel smell. You'll notice that. Now, a lot of things can cause these, which is why we had tried replacing a bunch of different sensors, because first thing you look up on the forums, it'll say it's this or it's that, but we've replaced everything like said, and we still have this problem. So I'm going to put a diagram with the ICM, crankshaft, fuse center, tachometer, coil, distributor. It's all in one short thing with the main wires that you want to check your voltages at for anybody that needs them. Now, I'm going to go over the voltages we got testing these. Alright, as you can see, we checked the crank sensor, the power it's getting with the ignition on, and the ICM cranking voltage with the coil unplugged and with the coil plugged in. Now, cranking voltage for the ICM is about 9.5 or so, and the control white wire is about 1.9 to 2.1 AC volts with about 3.7 to 4.7 DC volt. Now, the correct spec for this, from what I remember, is 1 to 4 volts. Ground, 0.25 volts. If you have a high voltage on ground, that's not good, and you want to look into any potential shorts. Coil plugged in. Now, what we tested this with the coil unplugged and plugged in for is because if there's a major difference between when the coil is plugged in and unplugged, that's something you're going to want to look into further. Now, as you can see here, the voltages are very similar, so there's not an issue here. Crank sensor gets good power, good ground, and signal. This is not cranking, just ignition on. Now, we also tested the crank sensor power, signal wire cranking, the coil plugged in, cranking, and then ignition on, crank plugged in, back probed with a T-bar. Same with the coil plugged in. And what was stumping us was, why are all of these voltages looking good and the truck's not starting? It ran at one point badly, but it ran. So what we tested tonight, after 12 volts here, good ground, we noticed at the coil, what you want to do is take a test light, put the test light to battery positive, and back probe the coil, white wire with a black line, with the test light. And what you should see when you're cranking the engine is the test light flickering. If the test light doesn't flicker, that means it's not getting the proper pulse signals, or the pulses of voltage, in order to fire the coil to the spark plugs. This is tested on our end due to it having no spark. Now, what we tested, since this had no pulsing for us, was, since the ground and power was good, we tested the white wire that goes from the ignition control module, which is right here, or vehicle control module, VCM, to the ICM. Now, what you're going to do here is put voltmeter positive with a T-bar and back probe this connector when it's plugged in, and then bring that to battery negative. What you do is ignition on, look at your voltage. Then when you're cranking, you should also check the voltage on that. Our case, which we did, was we put the T-bar in between the terminal and the casing, I guess, inside the connector. As you can see in this clip coming up, that it made a connection inside. So our issue is more than likely a bad connector. But if you get a bad voltage here and a bad cranking voltage, there's more than likely an issue between the ICM and the ECM on this wire, or a potential other wire. So here's our clips. Ignition on. Crank. What the heck? Yo, Dad. I just stuck this T-pin in there and the truck ran, and when I pulled it out, it shut off.
And that's where it's probably not making a connection.
Yep. Our issue was no spark, no start. We pushed the terminal with the T-pin, started right up. Stayed running when we pushed on it. Another thing is when we pulled the T-pin out, as you guys saw, truck died instantly. So that shows that we have a very high probability, almost 100%, I'd say, that we need a new connector for this ICM. I'm not too surprised. The truck has 307,000 miles on it before we got rebuilt. This is the second motor, or rebuild, on second motor, second rebuild, sorry. Now, another thing is the ICM and the coil are together on this truck, and they're bolted directly to the top of the motor. Another thing taken into account is heat, vibration. It's right on top of the motor. Not too surprised that if there was a loose terminal or terminal to wire connection inside the connector. So, again, I hope this helped anybody out who might be having these problems with their truck. 5.7 Vortec. I hope these wiring diagrams help anybody out. And drop a subscribe. If you guys want to see more info, see more videos, if you want, go check out the camshaft correlation or cam retard videos. That can also be an issue on these trucks if the distributor is ever removed, or if, say, you do an intake job, remove the distributor. It is a good idea to reset the cam retard, and that can cause some like rough idle issues or popping and sputtering if you don't set it. We go over that in the other one, but I hope this helps anyone out. Catch you guys in the next one.